Now, three stories we were watching last week. President Joe Biden announced new steps to protect communities from extreme heat. There's billions of dollars to plant trees and make buildings more heat resistant. Phoenix residents have now suffered through the hottest month in Arizona history. The Maricopa County Coroner's Office has had to bring back the COVID-era coolers for bodies because the office is over capacity during this deadly heat wave. The warden at Arizona's Perryville Prison for Women abruptly retired after a series of 12 News reports revealing that inmates were living in extreme heat conditions, and the state's new prisons director apparently didn't know about it. And the Arizona Republic reports that the Saudi Arabian company at the center of a controversy over leases allowing it to pump groundwater under state land recently hired a new lobbyist. He's the business partner of Governor Katie Hobbs' top campaign advisor. Hobbs' spokesman declined to comment on the connection. Hobbs' staff has recommended not renewing the Saudi company's leases. Well, the 2024 Arizona primaries are exactly 1 year out, and we start with a must-watch election. For the last 3 cycles, Arizona voters have decided who won the White House and which party controlled the U.S. Senate. In 2024, voters in a Maricopa County congressional district will help decide which party runs the House of Representatives too. Here's a snapshot of the first congressional district rated as a toss-up in 2024. The first is one of Arizona's wealthiest districts, taking in Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, Fountain Hills, and a slice of Central Phoenix. 7-term Republican David Schweikert won the district by less than a percentage point in 2022. Voters in the district swung Democratic after Donald Trump's election in 2016. Democrats at the top of the ticket, Kyrsten Sinema, when she was still a Democrat, Joe Biden, Mark Kelly, and Katie Hobbs have all won the vote there. The 5 candidates in the Democratic primary are Andre Cherney, a former congressional candidate and head of the state Democratic Party, Maureen Gillan-Woods, a former broadcast journalist, Andrew Horn, an orthodontist, Kurt Cromer, a former Red Cross executive, and State Representative Amish Shah, an emergency room doctor. All 5 Democratic primary candidates will be invited for interviews over the next several months. Andre Cherney is the first to join us. Welcome to Square Off.
Thanks for having me.
So I was reading up on you, and you were a Democratic political prodigy of sorts, volunteering for the Michael Dukakis campaign when you were 12. You were a 21-year-old speechwriter for President Bill Clinton. You've been a Democrat for a long, long time. What did you learn at that early age that stuck with you today as you've grown up and matured and have a family?
Yeah. You know, what I learned first and foremost is that progress is possible. When I was working in the Clinton White House, we were able to balance the budget. We were able to expand health care for people. We were able to protect Social Security. I worked with then Vice President Gore to help sound the alarm for the climate crisis that we're now facing. And I also learned that the decisions that get made in Washington and throughout our political process matter. They matter to people. As you said, I am somebody who's a father. My kids are in middle school and high school now. They're 5th generation Arizonans. And they're 5th generation through my wife's family. We've lived here for 20 years and been active in this community. My 4 grandparents, though, were concentration camp survivors. And my parents grew up under a communist dictatorship. And I was born here in the United States, but always grew up believing that we shouldn't take our democracy for granted. And yet, right now, when we look at what's happening in Washington, we're seeing exactly that happening. We're seeing our democracy under threat. We're seeing the climate crisis. We're seeing economic opportunity disappear for people. And what I learned in those years was that the decisions that we make in Washington are really ones that have a profound impact throughout our entire country.
Let's stay with the climate crisis. Phoenix is closing the books on its hottest month ever, an alarming record that's part of a 2-decade trend line. We've been going this way for quite a while. You mentioned your experience with Al Gore, known for his work in that area. Also, the business you worked for several years was involved, the financial services business was involved in sustainability. So if you're elected, what policies would you pursue in Congress that you think could make a difference, especially when it comes to heat?
Absolutely. Well, look, climate crisis is here now, right? We just walk out of this air-conditioned studio and we see the heat, we see the water issues, we see the drought. Arizona is ground zero for the climate crisis, and it is a clear and present danger to our people's future. The opposite side of that, though, is it is an enormous economic opportunity for Arizona. Arizona should be the solar state. We should be to clean energy what Detroit is to cars, what Silicon Valley is to computers. We should be the place that is creating those industries, creating those jobs of the future that'll mean not just great jobs, but money in people's pockets. And the kinds of policies we need is policies that help the private sector grow and invest. As you said, I started a business in this space and ran it for 10 years. We helped millions of people around the country move billions of dollars out of the reach of being used to fund oil and gas pipelines and drilling. We planted hundreds of millions of trees to fight climate change, not only around the world, but right here in Phoenix, working with Mayor Gallego. Those are the kinds of policies we need that are going to help the private sector grow, help our economy grow, and help grow our middle class through a clean energy revolution.
Is it time for a carbon tax?
I think it's less about making the current energy sources more expensive and more about making the future energy sources more attainable for people and less expensive. And so for me, I would prefer to say, let's put our energy behind building those new industries, helping to bring down, as it's already been coming down, the price of solar, the price of wind, carbon capture. We saw, for instance, the CHIPS Act, which was a major investment and is a major investment in computer chips and semiconductors. It's had a profound impact on Arizona. It received bipartisan support from President Biden and Democrats in Congress. Governor Ducey, unfortunately, David Schweikert voted against it. But we're seeing right now 1/3 of all union carpenters in Arizona are working on either the TSMC or the Intel fabs. We need to have that same kind of approach when it comes to clean energy and really drive the economy of the future.
You've been successful in business, other areas, but not so successful in the ballot box. You've lost 3 races. Last one you ran was 11 years ago. What did defeat teach you?
Well, I think you do learn more from your failures than your successes. When I ran 11 years ago, it was in the primary against then State Senator Kyrsten Sinema. And, you know, back then we tried to warn people. We said, this is somebody who is cozy with, playing footsie with the Republican power brokers in the state, all the Republican lobbyists down in the state legislature. And a lot of people said, oh, you know what, a Democrat is a Democrat. And I think people are more sophisticated about that now. And so in this campaign, I'm going to be talking about my record, about a track record that people can trust, of having taken on these big fights, of having opposed Republicans in Washington when they were trying to privatize Social Security, when they were trying to put justices on the Supreme Court and succeeded in putting justices on the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade, when they were opposing gun safety legislation. My work as Democratic Party chair here in the state of taking on Jan Brewer, taking on Russell Pierce. People need to look at the track record of the candidates, and we're going to make sure that people know my history in that space.
All right, lightning round. I'm going to ask you a few questions, keeping in mind that whoever wins this district will need Republicans and independent voters, not solely Democrats. Reproductive rights. Do you support any limitations on a woman's right to an abortion?
Look, I think government should stay out of people's bedrooms, and I think government should stay out of people's doctors' offices. That is a decision that people should be making with their physician, with their conscience. I don't believe that it is the role of government to be limiting reproductive rights.
So no limitations?
I think we should be looking at going back to where Roe v. Wade was, and that was something that worked for almost 50 years. That is the kind of approach we should be starting at, and then let's have a conversation from there.
Would you ever vote to increase taxes?
I certainly would not vote to increase taxes on the middle class. I do think that the wealthiest people in our society, billionaires and so on, should be paying more taxes. We've seen corporate profits increase by 185% over the past 50 years. The wages of regular people increased by 1%. For most people, they've gone backwards. And so the people who are been most benefiting from this should pay their fair share. One of my problems with David Schweikert is he has been voting to increase taxes on the middle class. He's been voting to penalize married people just for the act of getting married. That's exactly the wrong kind of approach. We need to be more fair to the middle class and not penalizing them.
Do President Joe Biden and his administration understand what's happening at Arizona's border and how to deal with it?
I think they need to continue to make more investments in that space. I think we've gone in the right direction over these past few months, but we're on a trend of chaos at the border, of a border that is out of control. We need to be putting more resources behind border safety. Again, there's an issue where David Schweikert voted to cut the number of Border Patrol agents. I'm a former prosecutor. I was an assistant attorney general. I went after human smuggling rings. I went after those rings bringing people and drugs and guns across the border. And yeah, I think people in Washington, in both parties, have not understood what is going on at the border. That's part of my role as a congressperson, would be to make sure they understand and make sure we bring the right resources to get that border under control.